Well, hi. That's not the first slide. Yeah, so this thing is called How Do You Relate, or Can You Relate? I'm actually here to talk about how I find it hard to relate, or how you relate as an outsider. I've always felt myself to be a bit of an outsider. I've always inhabited the space between two worlds. And I think I got an early start at this. I mean, this is not uncommon, but I'm half Chinese and I'm half English. And so from the very start, you know, there was always some confusion about what are you, and people asking you, what are you, and who are you? Sometimes we'd walk into a Chinese restaurant, I'd have a Chinese, ethnically Chinese friend who couldn't speak Chinese. I would speak, the waiter would be perplexed. And in the end, I would just say, look at his face, listen to my voice. So, unsurprising to me that my life went on in this vein. And, you know, they say that there are those kids, or Jerry Seinfeld says, there are those kids, and when they play Monopoly, they read the rules on the inside of the box. Those guys are the lawyers. So I had a bit of that in myself. But I also had a big interest in art and creativity. You know, there was a big part of me that liked logic and liked rules and liked parameters and the kind of academic rigor which lends itself to law. And there was a part of me that liked, you know, being illogical or taking things that were unrelated and relating them. So this is me and my dad. That was the day I qualified as a solicitor. And he looks very pleased there. I don't think he's so pleased now, because life has taken quite a change. So I went to university in London, and all of a sudden I was thrown into this place where everybody pretty much knew what they wanted to be. They wanted to be a solicitor, or they wanted to be a barrister, or they wanted to go, you know, one day join the Conservative Party, and go be in the House of Commons, or whatever. And I didn't actually know that I wanted to do that, and I had all these other thoughts about what I wanted. And meanwhile, I was getting this education and having to think in a certain way. You know, as I mentioned, law is all about logic, all about procedure, all about rules, all great things, and I like them very much. And I like to think that I'm pretty okay at them too. But at the same time, I was giving myself my own education, or London was giving me an education. So basically, this is what my law notes look like. These are all sketches taken from various museums in the UK. I mean, that's the Natural History Museum, that's the Tate Britain, that's the Aquarium, that one's actually Madrid, and that's the British Museum. I mean, same all the way through. These are all my notebooks, you know, where I was supposed to be writing down things about the Maastricht Treaty. I was drawing friends and family. You know, it was a way for me to cope and a way for me to learn. I was using this other way of thinking sort of to compensate for ways in which I felt that I couldn't think. And so gradually, sort of things started to go along in a way that I was becoming something else, and I wasn't actually sure what that was, and I didn't know actually what it was I was doing. And this is kind of what changed everything. I wrote this play, and then I forced all my friends and my brother to be in it. And that turned out to be great, and I'm actually really surprised that they stuck by that. We worked on it for about 3 months, and now looking at it, I must have seemed like a complete psycho to make them do this, practice all the time. And I'm very grateful that they did this, because it led to the best summer job ever. So someone saw my play and they said, wow, this guy can write. And so sort of like not a very high benchmark, but I was literate. So they hired me to write for this women's lingerie magazine. So I thought, yeah, sure, all right. And I thought, in order to be more relatable and to make this lingerie magazine a bit more fun to read, I would pose as a woman writer And this was before bloggers were big. So this was sort of like just a journalist, but now I would make it a blogger. And I made my pen name Millie Chung rather than Billy Potts. And I wrote about this lady's adventures, and she was always getting in and out of underwear, and so that I could talk about what these guys were selling, and that was fun. But the best thing about this was I met my business partner there, this guy who said, "Hey, why don't we start a design house?" And I said, "No, that's really stupid. I'm going to go be a lawyer and make a bunch of money. Thanks, though." But in the end, actually, I took him up on this, and this is when I started going into design. And I actually stupidly said to him, like, "Hey, you know what, Joe? I kind of like art, but I don't like it as much as I used to, because I like art that does stuff and has a function." And he said, "Yeah, that's design, buddy." So I was moving into this area, which, I kind of had this base desire to do it, but I hadn't had sort of X training or Y degree from, whatever design school. So as you could see, I lacked technically. This is one of the first technical drawings that I drew with my friend Joe. It's actually on the back of a receipt. But out of that, we grew this company, and we called it the Handsome Bag Company. And it was just a little thing, and it all started because I came across these people who were upholsterers, and they were doing upholstery for taxis. And I interrupted their mahjong game one day, and I walked in, and I said, "Can I have some of that upholstery?" And they said, "Sure," and they gave it to me, and I played with it, and gradually I learned that I could make bags and watch straps and other stuff out of it. And it was kind of an odd idea, but I feel like had I been classically trained as a designer, I probably would not have approached it in that way. I probably would have seen the thing and thought, well, no, that's not the way you approach design. You don't start with a material and try to make something out of that. You start with the thing that you want to make and choose the material that's best suited to it. So I had this sort of naivete that allowed me to do things that sort of facilitated my progression in a way. And sort of back then I had all these lofty ideals about the triple bottom line, and that I would be saving the planet and helping people and making profit. I was very ambitious at the time, but I realize now that actually this represents much more. It comes back to what I am culturally and ethnically, and it's about how I relate to people. I'm not exactly at home in any particular place, although I can be comfortable in many. But the fact is, because of that, because I'm constantly out of my comfort zone, as many people are, I was able to approach such people, talk to them in such a way, and convince them to do stupid stuff, like make bags out of taxi seats or be in a play. And rather than planet, it was actually the environment that I was thinking about, and not the environment in the way that the trees and the plants and the animals, but the environment which we live in, like our surroundings. I actually found that I was gaining a sort of perspective on the place where I lived, and I was using things around me which I would not have used had I been told, you should approach things in this way. If I'd been to design school, I would have probably followed a much different track and gone a much different direction. So these were the sorts of things that we made. I actually remember approaching this lady, Edith Chung, and she was one of the people who worked on costumes for movies like The Last Emperor. And she very kindly took a meeting with me, and I said, "Hey, I'm making these things out of taxi upholstery. What would be the best thing to do for lining?" And she said, "To be honest, you're breaking every single rule by using this. So I don't see how you could succeed by following rules now. You should just continue doing what it is you're doing." And then the same thing happened when a friend put me in touch with the head of lighting design at Philips. And he also happens to be a dean of a school in the Netherlands called the Design Academy of Eindhoven. And he said, well, what do you want to come here for? And I said, well, I want to learn to design, and I want to learn to use all those programs and meet all these people. And he said, I don't think you really need to do that. That would be a waste of your time because you can teach yourself how to draw, and we're kind of teaching people how to think here. I think you're probably better off just doing this. I mean, you've broken all the rules thus far anyway. Keep doing that. So it's very nice and honest of him. And now, this little idea has sort of grown into something different. It's sometimes difficult because I can't relate with other designers either. I couldn't exactly relate with other lawyers, and then now I have this thing with designers where I can't exactly talk to them about all these materials and all these processes, even though I'm learning, because I just haven't got the technical background. It's kind of frustrating, and I ran into all sorts of credibility issues. People were always saying, well, obviously it's not the lawyer doing this stuff, it's his architect business partner who's doing it. And I actually had a problem with that too. I had sort of a crisis of confidence. I was thinking, is it actually Joseph who is doing all of this stuff? What am I contributing? Like, am I just pretending? But then I gradually sort of worked through it, and this little product design project turned into this little advertising agency, which I started. And all of a sudden, when the first email came in from Procter & Gamble and they said, come in and talk to us about doing this, I was sort of amazed. And the same thing happened when Ascot Chang and Red Bull called and said, come help us do things. It was kind of mind-blowing to me that they actually wanted to hear the perspective of an outsider. They had designers, they have so many people in their employ that could do this. They wanted to hear someone else's point of view. They wanted something unrelated. And I still struggle sometimes. This is something which I did recently where we turned a tram into a restaurant, and this is the tram when we found it. And I kind of had this sort of crisis in my own mind, kind of thinking, what am I doing crawling around in this tram in a boiler suit with paint on my fingers and glue in my eye? Like, I have a university degree. I could be in an office right now, billing the hours, making the bucks, and instead I'm here, basically like a construction worker. And it's hard to kind of reconcile these things in my mind, all these unrelated aspects. But then finally, this is what the tram turned out as in the end. I was very proud of it. I was immensely proud. And it's at moments like this where it all comes together, all the unrelated becomes related, and everything which seemed so random, like the visits to the museums and the sketches in the notes and the law school, all of it came together all of a sudden, and it seemed that my life had been so much richer for it. And rather than being about finding the commonality between everything, I find actually relating is recognizing the differences in everything and everybody, and recognizing that nobody is actually a crude or broad brush representation of one particular thing. And in the end, what am I? Well, I'm nothing more than myself, and I accept that now. And thank you very much.